Hey guys, it's Billy again. I thought I'd go ahead and do another episode. I hadn't really planned on doing one this soon, but I went on a walk earlier and did a video for my Gecko's Trails channel, and I thought, I want to go for another walk. So I decided, hey, I might as well make another video for the Wiccanarium. So today I wanted to talk about what Wicca is to me. I'm not citing any books. It's from what I've learned and what I've incorporated into my own traditions. This is what Wicca means to me and my understanding of Wicca. It may be a lot different from some of the other places you see written about Wicca, but that's why my spiritual path is eclectic Wicca. Because when you're solitary like me, you don't have, a coven philosophy to kind of adhere to when you're in the group. So your spiritual path in Wicca becomes very personal and different from anybody else's. So this is what Wicca means to me. Let me go ahead and turn you around. All right, so this is kind of, in the vein of my nightly walk and talks. So yesterday's video kind of explained my journey through Wicca. How I found out about it, the people I've had in my life where Wicca is concerned, and basically kind of where I ended up. And kind of a culmination into the philosophy of Divinum Sustenere. Well, today I want to talk about more of what Wicca is to me and how I've interpreted what I've read over the years. And you got to remember, I've been studying Wicca off and on since 1989. So 99, 09, 19, that's more than 30 years. So when I first read about Wicca and Whitley Strieber's Cat Magic, it was, you couldn't really discern a tradition. Although at that time, things were mostly Gardnerian or Raymond Buckland's version of Gardnerian, which ended up being Sex Wicca, which is the Norse tradition. But in the early years, it was very much like Gardnerian. Especially if you watch any of the videos that were released about Raymond Buckland, and his book, which inspired a generation. I forget exactly. I think it was like Raymond Buckland's Book of Witchcraft or something like that. But we used to call it the Big Blue Book of Bullshit. Just, if you're not necessarily playing it down, it was just, a lot of people who became solitary and kind of evolved their practice of Wicca into a very personal tradition, saw the strict adherence to ritual, and it had to be this way, and that the more ceremonial magic as kind of, calling bullshit, because it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, some people like that, and it's great for them. But for those of us who prefer to be solitary, it's not like that. But getting back to kind of what I learned at the time from cat magic, even though it was a book of fiction, it was based on the actual religion of Wicca. So they had the god and the goddess, although they emphasized more of the goddess than the god, mainly because at the time in society, people were kind of done with the patriarchy. And going back to the earth-based goddess religion was something that was very appealing to early Wiccans, and it still is to this day. So it focused mainly on the goddess, but the group that the coven that was there, they kind of, and they had a high priestess, but you hardly ever heard about him, other than, by name, but he was never really in the picture. And there was a focus on the priestess aspect of the coven being the maiden mother and crone. And the old woman who contracted the young artist to come illustrate her book did so with the intention of kind of passing the reins and becoming the crone, and kind of initiating her into maidenhood and then into the mother of the coven and being high priestess. So, and there was an element of the Fae in the storyline, and there were dealings with them, the mountain fairies. So even then, it was kind of a blend of Celtic and like Welsh, English Wicca, which is, this where my ancestry is from. I'm largely from the British Isles, mainly England and Wales, although I do have a lot of Irish and Scottish, and of course Northwestern Europe as well, or Northeastern Europe as well, France and Norway, Sweden, not Norway, but Sweden, and even Spain. My great-great-great-grandmother was Selena Cabello, who is descended from Don Juan Cabello, who was one of the founding fathers of San Antonio, Texas. And they came on orders of the King of Spain from the Canary Islands. So I'm partially a Canary Islander. Which there is a Canary Islander society in San Antonio for the members of those 7 houses that founded San Antonio. I could claim membership into that if I wanted to, because I can document my lineage to that family. Anyway, so there was a huge focus on, within their little intentional community, of getting back to nature, making their own clothes and soaps, and building their own little houses out of what was sourced right there on the property, the wood, the mud, the adobe, whatever. And just getting back to that symbiosis with nature. And that's really what drew me to Wicca, growing up where I did in southeast Texas, in the middle of the woods. I mean, our nearest neighbor by road was like 4 miles away. Through the woods, it was 3/4 of a mile to their property line. You know, and they had a big plot of land. It probably would have been at least a mile to their house. So I grew up in the woods. So that back to nature aspect really appealed to me. And that whole mystery, the feeling of mystery, and not in a scary, spooky way. It's almost an ecstatic feeling. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just that mystery that can enfold you and embrace you. And I don't know how else to describe it. It just feels good. And it feels right. And I've heard a lot of people say something similar to that, that Wicca just feels right to them. And that's what drew me in. And of course, there's the mysteries, the spells, the magic. And at the time, I didn't really get what exactly the magic was. I just knew, because I was a lover of fantasy novels, you know, Tolkien, and I played D&D from 1977 to present, you know. I still play D&D. So magic was very real in my life as fiction. So it kind of made sense that magic in reality would appeal to me. Now, I understood that it wasn't like movie magic, you know, like Charmed, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. No. It wasn't until later that it kind of fell into place that, okay, everybody does magic, you know. It's the kneeling down and folding your hands together and closing your eyes and saying a prayer to God like the Christians do. That is a spell. It's ritual. You are focusing, you're quieting and meditating yourself and focusing your intent on a goal or an outcome. It's the same, the prayer is the same as casting a spell. So I read more, you know, from any source that I could find back then, because there was no internet. And being in the Bible Belt, you just couldn't go to your local library and find a book. Nobody was writing about Wicca yet, really. I mean, Gerald Gardner, Starhawk, and just a couple of others, Raymond Buckland, and then Scott Cunningham wrote his books on solitary Wicca, and that changed the game. Oh, you don't have to belong to a coven? Well, that's even better, you know? And books quickly became the means of learning about Wicca, not people. And so, you know, I bet you the early people that wrote books about Wicca made money hand over fist from book sales. And I'm not downplaying the significance of the books either by saying that. It would be comparable to somebody a couple of years ago writing about cryptocurrency and, getting in on that when it first started. And now there's a cryptocurrency boom, So the fact that it was a nature-based religion that embraced magic, that appealed greatly to me, and I had to know more. So I read up on different pantheons and different gods and goddesses, because there are quite a few. There's the Sumerian, there's the Egyptian, Babylonian, Norse, Hindi, Native American, even. But that's more shamanism than Wicca, and I'm not going to touch on that in this talk. But, Celtic, Italian, which would go with Roman, and Greek. So there's all these different pantheons and different gods and goddesses, who to choose? What pantheon do you choose? And it wasn't until later, and talking with multiple people, that it became evident to me you don't have to choose a pantheon. As an eclectic Wiccan, you work with who calls you, or you work with who you vibe with the best. And yes, I'm using the word vibe, because it's frequency, it's resonation, it's a vibe. And like me, in the talk yesterday, I kind of said that, I said my patron and patroness, my god and goddess, are Bridget and Cernunnos, who are Celtic. But that stems from my Anglo-Celtic roots, because England and Wales, with Ireland and Scotland thrown in. So it could have been any one of a large pantheon of gods and goddesses. Hold on. Motorcycles are loud. So I knew at an early time, because of my poetry, that the goddess I resonated with the most was Bridget, or Breed. And because of, it wasn't that far of a leap to settle on the god Cernunnos, because of my love of the wild places and of nature and wildlife. Which is, that's why I like to hike. I like being in nature. And that's why I want to hike the Appalachian, Pacific Crest, and Continental Divide trails, because I want to immerse myself in that natural surroundings as much as I can. Hiking those trails is going to be very spiritual for me. But, and it didn't go unnoticed by me that a lot of Wicca, the gods, the goddesses, the Wheel of the Year, centered and focused on a time in our history when we had to know these things to survive. That basically was how we lived. That was our life. The Wheel of the Year and the harvest and fertility and planting, sowing the seeds and everything, that was very much bound with the social culture, because you had to know those things to survive. So it only made sense that if you relied on it that much for your survival, you would kind of make it sacred. And that's why to this day, Wiccans still follow the wheel of the year. And they kind of told the story of the god and goddess, the birth, the life, death, and rebirth cycle that is evident in nature as the cycle of the god and goddess. Because, in nature, that's what is. So in all things, there is divinity. So the story of the god and goddess would be reflected by the cycles of nature on Earth. So, and it's the same across the different pantheons. The story may be slightly changed, the names changed, but it's essentially the same. So, Wicca, as through the wheel of the year, became a full-fledged religion in my mind. So you had the bare bones of Wicca, a magic embracing nature goddess religion, that kind of elements in the natural world personified the deity archetypes. The moon for the goddess, the sun for the god, woodland creatures for the god, the plant life and flowers for the goddess. And you can see divinity in all things because we are all divinely created. We are children of the god and goddess. And that is reflected through the sacred geometry as well. But that's going to be another talk as well. So the different people tried to revive these old religions, and that's what Wicca became. Mostly through the efforts of Gerald Gardner, who was a British civil servant, who worked for a long time in the Far East, in the Middle East, India, and the Orient, in that area. And he was also an amateur anthropologist. So he studied ancient cultures, and that led him to the ancient religions, and he saw the connection between that and the earth, and how we as humans are supposed to live. And that's why I believe that he basically founded Wicca, especially after the British Parliament abolished the anti-witchcraft laws. Still feeling a bit horny. Sorry. That was in another video. I can't remember if it was the one I did yesterday or one I did on Gecko's Trails. They were blowing their horn and I said that. Anyway, I get off topic. So, you have a nature embracing, or a magic embracing, earth-based religion that is polytheistic, meaning more than one god and goddess, that believes in reincarnation, and that is the wheel of the year, the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth, just like you see in the natural world. And it makes sense, even from a scientific standpoint, because I believe it's the third law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, and our soul is energy. Okay, there was a study done where they weighed people, and at the moment of their death, there is a noticeable, perceptible, recordable change in weight in the body. It's like minuscule, but it's consistent every time that somebody dies. And they say that's the soul escaping the body, because the shell is dead. There's nothing to keep that energetic force within the body anymore, the brain, or wherever it's kept. So that energy has to go somewhere. And what is the next best thing to that shell but another shell? So it finds a baby being conceived or born, and it becomes that next new life. Well, people will say, well, why don't you have memories of your past lives? Well, you do and you don't. You got to remember, the earth is energy as well. It's crystalline, and it's silicone based. And what are crystals used for? Well, they're used in radio and computer components for memory. I mean, you can program a crystal. So our memories from our energetic soul downloads these memories into the earth. You know, and everybody does this. It's not something they do consciously. It just happens. So when people say the earth is memory, they're being literal. And some cultures call that the Akashic record. And if you know how, through meditation, you can access those memories. So that's why some people can remember past lives, because they've learned how to, whether consciously or unconsciously, to tap into the Akashic record and find them. Because your energy is specific to you. Everybody has their own frequency. So your memories would resonate at your frequency. All you have to do is look for them, and you'll find them. But you don't have to just look at your memories. You can look at any memory that's in the Akashic record if you know how. I'm not saying I do know how. I don't. I've tried. I'm not there yet. But, so what I'm getting at is your body, your brain, is basically a bioelectrical computer that stores information through electrochemical processes. So when you're recalling a memory, you're triggering that synapse in your brain to access that memory that's stored in your brain. Well, when your shell dies, so does that bioelectrical computer. All that memory that's in the shell is gone. It's a dead computer. And when your soul, your energy, inhabits that new body, you're in a new shell that's at default factory settings. It doesn't have any memories yet. So that's the easiest way that I found to explain it. Which, okay, reincarnation is real, but that's why we don't remember our past lives. But we can, if we learn how. So let's run through the list again. You have a magic-embracing nature religion that's polytheistic, gods and goddesses, that follows the wheel of the year and believes in reincarnation. That's it in a nutshell. That's Wicca. Everything else is just reconstruction of earlier time periods. The trying to recover old spells and old traditions, old rituals, to kind of reinvent the old religion into Wicca. It's all, decoration, for lack of a better word. It's the clothes that Wicca wears. And of course, and people make, back in the day when I first met my wife, there was huge debates going on traditionalized Wicca and solitary Wicca, and which was accepted and which wasn't within social groups. People were saying that to be in a tradition was better. You were a better Wiccan if you had a tradition and were in a coven, versus just being off by yourself doing your own thing. They downplayed being solitary, because at that time it was still relatively new, back in the mid to late 80s. And people, struggled for a long time trying to find covens to learn Wicca from, and trying not to get taken for a ride or abused or taken advantage of by unworthy teachers who are only out for their physical pleasure. They tried to make it mandatory when they did the Great Rite. They actually had to have sex with you. It's symbolic. Granted, in some traditions, they actually do perform the intercourse. But they were saying you had to, which you don't. If you don't feel comfortable doing that with somebody else, especially if you're married and that's not your partner, then they should not force you to do it. Nobody should ever force you to do something you don't want to do. And that brought a bad light on Wicca through mainstream society. And it's been a stigma that it's been a long time in passing. Another issue is some traditions perform their ritual sky-clad, which means they don't have any clothes on. And they're doing ritual nude. And some people don't like doing that. And they were saying, well, you can't participate if you have your clothes on. And that is another thing that's wrong. They should not have to make you do anything to be a part of Wicca. It's not the Masonic Lodge where if you don't follow the rules, you get kicked out. No, it's a religion. And that's something I never got about the Catholics and everything, the excommunication. You can't excommunicate somebody from a religion. It's their spirituality. It's a part of them. You can't take that away. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic here. But that's basically what Wicca is to me in a nutshell. It's not really all that complicated. It's just it means different things to different people, you know, like the different traditions. And that's the biggest hang up with people. And I know I seem to be going around in circles here, but you know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And I need to kind of be careful as I get closer to the interstate because of that dead deer. There could be coyotes now that it's nighttime. I noticed that they had gotten, when I went on my earlier walk, it was still kind of dusk and light outside, and it was torn apart. So the coyotes have gotten to it previous nights. I don't want to run into them. So anyway, and granted, you know, now that I have more knowledge of sacred geometry and, you know, the whole science behind creation and consciousness, I feel like some of that mystery within Wicca has been lost, but I am trying to reclaim it. And I might not be able to. Once you've seen something, or once you know something, you can't unsee it or know it. But I want to try to get some of that back, what I felt and how I practiced Wicca in the beginning, and kind of get back to that, even with my knowledge, because that's what first attracted me to Wicca. So that's my Wicca in a nutshell. So I don't really know at this point what else to talk about. So I guess I will kind of cut this video off here, so it's not, you know, an hour and 9 minutes long like the last one was, I think it was. So that being said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you like this video and any other video I've done, which isn't many at this point, go ahead and hit that like button. And while you're at it, go ahead and click that notification bell to be notified anytime I upload a new video to the Wiccanarium. I just love that name. And if you'll notice in that long video that I posted, in the description I kind of wrote a Webster-like dictionary definition of Wiccanarium. So it's not an actual word, but etymologically that's what it would mean. And if you don't know what etymology is, it's the study of words and the origins of words. So there you have it. Until next time, y'all stay safe and blessed be. Merry part. We'll see you later.